Hello and welcome back to another episode of App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Finalist and Inoreader. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Welcome back to the show. We had Christopher Lawley on last week, and it's always fun to talk to Chris. I got to talk to Chris, Federico, during the pro show, I got to talk about video and audio workflows. One of your least favorite topics, I think, in the whole world.
Yeah. I'm still gonna listen. I'm behind.
I bet you are.
Yeah, I'm in between podcast apps, and so my queue is suffering a little bit. I'll talk about that in the pro show later.
I'm very curious about it. I've been trying to test the water. You know, I've been on Apple Podcasts for so long, and I know you find that insane. But
I still think that's a bit like
it's not a bit
that you're doing. I think it's a bit. I think
all I do is go to the latest episodes list and just pick something. That's all I do anymore.
Absolutely wild.
I know. And I actually moved Pocket Casts onto my home screen, and instead what I do is I just search for Apple Podcasts. So I've just made my life worse. That's all I've done.
I have no idea why you keep doing this to yourself, but hey, if that makes you happy, that's fine.
I know.
What are we talking about today, John?
So we're getting into what I would consider the final beta stretch, right? I mean, as we record this, we just got beta 5 for the OSs. And I figure we're probably, what would you say, 2, maybe 3 betas away from release?
We're about a month away from release, I would say.
I mean, the last 2 years were very consistent. The OSs came out on the 14th and the 15th of September in the last 2 years. I took a look because I started having that late summer anxiety about getting my review done. And so we're at the point where things should be start tightening up. There shouldn't be too many changes. On the other hand, with beta 5, we're seeing a lot of new app icons on the iPhone. We're seeing some changes to third-party APIs. There are changes still happening, but I feel like we're probably at the tail end of the significant changes, and we'll be heading into a more tightening up period before the release. And I thought it'd be a good time just to kind of check in on, I don't know, where we are with the betas and talk a little bit more about Siri AI too. In particular, the Siri app itself is something that I've been thinking about a lot.
I would say that this has been the most boring beta season since I started doing my annual iOS reviews.
Yeah. How so?
It's just boring. It's just I don't know if it's well, obviously I think it doesn't help that we're coming from last year, right? And it was such a massive year for the iPad in iPadOS 26 and the new design, and it made everything exciting. It's a transition year for Apple, literally. I mean, we're going to see a transition from Tim Cook to John Ternus.
Yep.
The focus has been on bug fixes and performance improvements. And it's just, my problem is that if my friends ask me like, hey, what's coming in the new operating system in September, what should I tell them? Because like, they're not going to have access to Siri AI in Europe.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that. Because that's what I would tell people here. It's like, well, if you want something like ChatGPT, but free,
Right. But what else should I explain? Then now you can, link to sections in Apple Notes, or that there's a slightly different Safari icon, or I don't know that
you can look forward to ads in the maps, or
that the App Store has a slightly refreshed design. Like it's not a. There are tons of bug fixes and small improvements here and there. The big feature is obviously Siri AI and the other improvements to Apple Intelligence. But if you don't get access to those, then what is left in iOS 27? And my issue gets compounded by the fact that I haven't really used Siri AI that much because I don't find it to be that impressive, really. I mean, when I ask for Siri stuff, It's better than before. I don't subscribe to the notion that I've heard from other people that they have fully replaced their ChatGPT usage with Siri AI usage. I mean, actually, no, let me rephrase. I believe they did. And maybe the truth that they don't want to hear is that they're getting worse results because of that. Because I have been running dozens and dozens of the same regular web searches. Like, I want to find out information about the best tires I want to buy for my car, or I want to find the best restaurants in this seaside town, or I want to know what's the best way to go for a hike near Rome that doesn't involve driving for 2 hours. I've been running those searches side by side with Siri AI, ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, and my custom system in the Minis app using Kimi K3. You just get worse results in Siri AI. So the people who are saying, "Oh, I got excellent results, I stopped using ChatGPT." Have you ever used ChatGPT like with extended thinking or Pro? Because I don't really get it. For extended research, I wouldn't. For a medical question, I wouldn't go to Siri AI. Right? And so I really struggle. I really do struggle this year when the frontier of AI has moved so far ahead of what Apple is doing. Just using Siri AI exclusively feels like going back in time to 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think, I think OpenAI is kind of already responding in its own way, because not too long ago.
I didn't mean to begin this episode by crashing out about Siri AI.
No. I mean, I think there's a lot to talk. There's a lot to unpack with Siri. And what I was going to say is OpenAI has already sort of responded and anticipated the relaunch of the Siri app, because they made searches with Luna free. And Luna is actually 5.6. Luna is actually quite a good model.
5.6 Luna is so much better than whatever model Apple Foundation powered by Google is. Like,
right. And so that model, you don't have to be subscribed to $20 a month for ChatGPT, or $100 or $200. You don't have to have any subscription. That's part of the free ad supported plan now, and it's quite good. All right. So I have a lot of
Where do
thoughts.
we begin?
I want to start really big picture.
There are some good parts about Siri AI.
Well, I want to start with, how do you even evaluate Siri? Because here's my thinking about Siri, right? Siri has been a product, an idea, a marketing term, and a concept over the last 10 years almost, right? It's been all these things for so many years, and it carries with it an enormous amount of baggage. And it's not good baggage for the most part, especially in recent years. And so there's a couple of ways I feel like you can look at it. You can say, is Siri better now than it was a year ago?
Yes.
And I think the answer to that is definitively yes.
It is better.
But that's also not a very high bar. All right? It's just not. It's not a high bar at all.
Right.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Finalist. Finalist is a paper-inspired daily planner for the iPhone, iPad, Mac, and now Apple Watch. It brings your reminders, calendars, habits, tasks, notes, weather, and more together in one place, so you can plan your day, week, or month your way. Finalist 4.0 is the biggest update yet, adding notes that sync with iCloud. You can also point Finalist at a folder of Markdown files, including an Obsidian vault, and it will round-trip those files cleanly. Tasks inside your Markdown notes appear in Finalist's timelines on the correct days with the tags intact. The new Apple Watch app puts your day on your wrist. Its Now card adapts throughout the day, showing your first moves in the morning, the current time block with a countdown, and an evening wrap-up with the streaks you want to protect. There are complications and a Smart Stack widget too. On larger screens, Finalist's newsprint-inspired broadsheet layout gives you a beautiful overview of everything. Its Timeline tab is also great for sketching out a time-blocked day, especially with Apple Pencil Pro. Visit finalist.works to learn more, or follow the link in the show notes. AppStories listeners can get 50% off their first year. That's $14.99 instead of $29.99 with the code MacStories40. Again, go to finalist.works to learn more and use that code MacStories40. That's the numbers 40 for 50% off your first year. Our thanks to Finalist for their support of the show. Then the other aspect of it is, how does it compare as a product standing on its own, not just within Apple's ecosystem of platforms, but in the world at large, in the tech world at large, where we have these LLMs and chatbots already?
Yes, that is my problem, especially when, like, I think some folks who follow Apple and do what we do, they should put in their heads this concept that we're no longer just talking about the competition as some up and coming startup that has a novel AI, and that maybe that will become a problem for Apple. We're talking about a service that is used by 1 billion people every single week. 1/6 of the population on Earth is using it. And let's assume that billion people, right, they're all using it for free. Because, I mean, I think we're pretty much in agreement that the paying customers are like a rounding error for OpenAI at this point. So they're using ChatGPT for free, and they're using 5.6 Luna for free. That is a much better model by any measure, whether it's knowledge work, general questions, pre-trained knowledge that is contained inside the model, web search, tool calling, whatever you want to compare it to. It is so much better than the Apple Intelligence Foundation model powered by Gemini distillation.
Right. And you're getting to kind of like the second axis in a way of how I think about these things, which is how people use them.
Right.
Because I think
yes.
Right. Because
how do people use them?
Yes, because I think of those billion people, I would also suspect that not only are most of them using it for free, but most of them are using it as a substitute for web search, as opposed to automation, which is what we're doing.
No, they're not using it for automation. Let's just say that the 1% of ChatGPT users are either paying for it, or they know what Codex is, or maybe they know what ChatGPT. The developers, maybe they know what ChatGPT work is, because now OpenAI is really putting that in your face. But let's assume that 99% of people are just using it the casual way. They're doing web searches, and they're having conversations, right, with the chatbot, because I see this in regular life. I see regular people of all age groups having conversations with ChatGPT. Do we honestly think that when they compare that, used to be 5.5 instant, now it's 5.6 Luna, do we honestly think that it's better than that it's worse than the conversations they're going to have with Siri AI instead?
No, they're not. I mean, 5.5 instant was better than Siri, right? And now you've got 5.6 Luna, which is better than instant was.
For reasons that you touched upon in your story a few weeks ago. Like, even when you're just doing regular web searches, you're getting outdated results, right? It's not finding up-to-date information all the time. And it doesn't really reason about problems at all.
They're pretty generic responses too. Like that's the thing that bothers me about it. I feel like I'm just getting like a top level story on TripAdvisor or something like that. You know what I mean?
You had that line in your story that those responses, they feel like Google AI overviews. I haven't been able to stop thinking about that because it's so accurate. It is exactly that feeling. Like, yes, they are decent.
They're not wrong.
They're not wrong. They're just so.
Not usually.
They are generic supermarket responses.
Yes.
Like they are not superficial, but they're kind of shallow. They're serviceable, but I think people are used to having at this point something that is so much better, even when they do not pay for it.
I almost put a reference in that story to the movie Repo Man, which is from the mid 80s, and I figured no one would get it. But there's a scene in that movie where there's a guy working at the grocery store, and all the food in the grocery store is very 80s generic, where it'll be like a can that's white with black letters on it that says food. And there'll be another one that says, it'll be a box and it'll say crackers. And they'll be, it's that kind of generic thing that it doesn't have any personality.
Yeah. And so that's why it really, it's not that it bothers me, it surprises me when I hear folks say, no, I stopped using ChatGPT and Claude or Gemini for all kinds of knowledge work or web searches or general word knowledge because Siri AI is so good. And I'm like, okay, am I the crazy one then? Because like I've been doing the same searches, and especially when you want to dig down on a topic, whether it's about self-care or organizing a trip or doing research on a current event or a past event, it really just feels so much more shallow to me.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and this is something that just occurred to me the other day. We've seen over the past year to 2 years a real decline in Google traffic to websites.
Yeah.
And
which has been biting us too.
I think it's bitten literally every website on the planet at this point.
Yeah.
And I wonder, because Apple hasn't really been in the AI chatbot game up until now, I do wonder whether Siri, the app, is good enough that it's going to start off. That was
well. Nice. Keep it. I mean, that's what happens with these things.
I literally thought it was Jennifer opening the door and asking me a question, not knowing I was recording. But yeah, I wonder if what's going to happen is that this is going to, for sites like ours, sites that cover Apple, that there's going to be an even greater and more pronounced decline noticed when this is out in the world, because the app is going to replace the searches that people are doing for information about Apple products. I think probably not, but I did wonder.
Maybe, especially because Siri knows about the device itself. That is actually one of the nice things about it. Like, hey, how do I don't know, enable this feature? And Siri is just going to tell you and maybe open settings. Like that kind of stuff. Maybe you're not going to look for a tutorial anymore, right? I think it's especially hard and it keeps being difficult for me to evaluate Siri AI once you get a taste of what another AI experience feels like.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm getting at too with the website question, is that is not so much in particular what the consequences of it are, but are we living in a bubble in the world of Apple where many people are not using the chatbots as much as they might otherwise because Apple hasn't offered one? And is that going to change significantly? I don't know. I think at this point, with 1 billion people using ChatGPT, that most people have at least tried it. Maybe they're not using it regularly, but I would think that enough people are going to have some context for the difference between one and the other.
No, it's I agree, and it's not just ChatGPT, but like something that keeps surprising me is that more people use Gemini than I thought. Usually because they get it either at school or at work.
And it's shoved into basically every Google product now, whether it's your Mail or Docs or whatever.
But obviously, like when you hear on the news, right, something about AI, it's usually ChatGPT. It's usually what it is. And so And I used to, when I wrote my story about Siri AI a few weeks ago, I sort of came at it from the perspective of, well, I'm obviously very used to agents. I'm obviously very used to the very high end of AI tools. So maybe I need to reframe my perspective here a little bit, because Apple is not making an agent. And that is still true. But at the same time, I don't think you need to be a power user to be the kind of ChatGPT user that uses voice mode, or that uses dictation, or that has a long conversation, even with the free model. And in that case, I think you're still going to have a much better experience than Siri AI. If you're just having a long conversation, I see normal people just enabling voice mode and rambling for 20 minutes, right? With ChatGPT. You can do that with Siri AI, but it's not going to be as effective at following your thoughts and your monologue, whatever you're doing.
Right.
The one thing that Apple has going for it, obviously, is the on-device integration, right? That is, Apple is betting on app intents and integrations with apps. As that is the key differentiating factor at this point.
Yeah, but I think I want to talk about that, because I think, one, it's pretty limited, and two, it's not working super well. Okay.
I'll leave that to you then.
Well, so I'm going to back up for 1 second, which is, despite all of our criticisms, I do think, one, that Siri, the app, is going to be popular.
I think so.
And two, I think it is much better than what we have available today if you're talking to your HomePod or using your iPhone or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that that baseline has been established, but I don't think that is really the real baseline. The real baseline to me is what we've been already talking about with existing chatbots, because that's really what Apple has built here with the new app. And I've been playing around a lot with the Mac version of the app more than anything else for my review. And just the other day, I knew that I had gotten a Pages document from someone, and I had filed it away in a folder. And I knew where it was, but I was already testing the app. So instead of going to the Finder and digging through iCloud Drive and finding the Pages document, I just asked the app. I started up a new session, and I said, find this Pages document about this topic. And sure enough, it found it. It was right there. So I said, so my next request was open it. I can't do that. I was like, all right, well, open the folder where this document is. Can't do that either. So I right-clicked on it. Nope, can't do that either. I double-clicked it. Nope, can't do that. Tried to preview it to see if it was the right document. Nope, couldn't do that either. Literally can't do anything. But now, there is an app intent for opening files. It's just not hooked up to Finder on the Mac. And Federico, I mean, that's about as basic an action as you could want in a chatbot. And, I think there's a spectrum here when it comes to tool calling that is worth calling out. I mean, a lot of what you and I are doing is pretty complex stuff, because we're using CLIs and MCP servers and all these things to chain together actions between multiple third-party applications and our data, and putting it together in what is essentially a complex automation. And what Apple is offering is app intents, which can do multiple things in a chain, but they tend to be like sequential individual actions, and they're tied to only very certain apps, because the app has to implement it, and there has to be a schema and all the pieces of the puzzle for the app intent to actually work. The thing with the Finder is that that's just not hooked up, but it is hooked up if you want to create a calendar event, or you want to create a reminder or get a list of your reminders, that sort of thing. And that'll all be good. The problem is, I think people will hit walls very quickly, like I did, expecting that I should be able to open a file. Because you know what? If I ask for that same document in ChatGPT, where's this file? It returns the name of the file, and it's linked, because the thing is that tools like ChatGPT and Claude are using all sorts of other tools that are built into the Mac to make this stuff available. yes, I gave it permission to go find my files in iCloud Drive. That's why I could go in there and look for it and then return the link. But it also was able to give me the link and allow me to click on it and open up that folder. And you can't do that with Apple's app. And Apple made this whole thing, but there's no Apple script integration. There's no, none of the accessibility stuff is being brought to bear in the same way that computer use is built into things like Codex and Claude Code. None of that is being used. And it's just from the perspective of someone who knows that stuff is available and it's not being used, it's very frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me at all. The thing that I noticed myself, like, it's nice when I can ask Siri a question like, hey, find me this particular reminder or this particular Apple Note. And it's going to do that. It's going to present a nice UI for it, right? That's the kind of thing that that ChatGPT on its own cannot do. My problem is that I am used to asking, like, I want to use AI for complex or tedious things that I don't want to do myself, right? Because if they were easy, I would just do them myself.
Yeah.
When they're not easy, I want to ask the AI about it. But when you do ask those more complex requests that maybe involve checking a couple of sources or searching for a particular photo in my photo library, but maybe there are multiple occurrences of that type of photo over the years. Such as, for example, a few weeks ago, I wanted to look for my passport. Okay, and I know that I have a photo of my passport.
Right.
And this is the typical problem of Siri AI and the Apple Foundation model powered by Google Distillation. They share a similar syndrome, so to speak, which is, how do you want to call it? First passable result syndrome, in the sense that this model, and Apple keeps saying it's not a Gemini model, but hey, what's the expression, John? If it looks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, then it is a duck.
Yeah, probably a duck.
Apple Foundation model, just like any Gemini Flash model, as soon as it finds a first passable hit in whatever question you're asking, it stops there. And so when I asked for my passport, it gave me a photo of my expired passport from a few years ago that was in my photo library, but not my most recent one.
I had just the same thing the other day. I asked it, I thought, oh, here's a good way to confuse it. I said, tell me what Federico told me in messages about Twitter. Because I knew
it's no longer called Twitter, first of all.
I know, but we often refer to it as that still, right?
Yeah.
So I figured that would be confusing. And also, I knew that there were a lot of links in various iMessages to that service. And so sure enough, it didn't focus on recent things at all. It focused on things that it sent me some posts that you had sent to me about Pokemon from 2024 or something like that. You know what I mean? It was, and the other ones were from months ago. And so that's kind of the same kind
totally
of thing.
random. Like why? Why is that?
Right. Why is it this one from February and this
and
other
there's
one
no
from
way to
2024?
know, right? Because at least when you're using ChatGPT, when you're using Claude, you can click on the thinking steps, or you can see the thinking steps, and you can see how the model reached a conclusion. With Apple Foundation or Gemini models, they just randomly cut and take a shortcut to whatever seems like the easiest answer in the name of speed and efficiency. But maybe for some things you don't necessarily need speed and efficiency, right? But this is what you get with these kind of models. They land on whatever they think is a first good passable answer, and they give it to you.
Yeah. And they also seem to have hierarchies of apps that are checked in a certain order, I think, because I've asked things like, tell me what Federico mentioned about this topic. And if I don't say in messages or in email, it will start with email. It seems like every single time, even though you and I probably we have way more conversations in messages. And that's kind of the thing that we talked about before, which is, there's this concept that Apple talks about personal context, which
Right.
isn't so much personal context as it is access to databases. And
That is actually a good test. Just a couple of hours ago, we were
Yeah.
discussing on iMessage what should we be talking about today as we're recording the podcasts. So let's see. I'm going to ask Siri.
we've done this pretty much every week for the last
All right.
10 years.
All right. Let's phrase it in a way that I'm not directly referencing you first or iMessage, right?
Okay.
What am I supposed to talk about on the podcast today? So it's loading, reviewing results. You have a record AppStories event on your calendar first.
Yes, which I put that on there, I think. Yeah.
And it found an unrelated so here's the issue, all right? So when
Yeah.
I hear people say, no, it's so good with personal context, exactly which personal context? Because I
Right.
know that I have this conversation in iMessage. You and you asked me, what do you want to talk about on AppStories today? I have these topics in mind. And I said, sounds good. It pulled an event, says record AppStories, which I know it's in my calendar. Then it pulled an unrelated email message from a person this morning. And then it pulled some notes from my Notes app. One about a widget that I wrote about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
One is a session from WWDC about the Now Playing framework. And
Okay.
another is a note with a collection of games that came out in 2026 that I want to play. Let's try. So this is personal context at work, okay? Let's
Yeah.
try in a more direct way.
Yeah.
What did John tell me that we're supposed to be talking about on the podcast today? So I'm going to poke Siri. And
It's still a little vague because you didn't mention what podcast or what app.
I couldn't find any recent messages or emails from John about today's podcast topics. However, your reminders for AppStories episode 496 mentioned discussing the app and agent experiments you're running this summer. That's from 2 weeks ago, right?
That was from 2 weeks ago, yeah.
So many problems here, right? First of all,
Yeah.
when I hear these people saying personal context is so good, how good? Like, what is your good threshold? Exactly. Is this good? What I just demoed, is it good? Because I don't think it is for me. Second, the opaque process that is the indexing.
Mhm.
How fast is it? Like, are these messages from you today indexed? Can I force the indexing? Is there a way for me to control the indexing? No. The answer is no.
Right. Yeah, no, it was like those messages were probably 2 hours ago, something
Those
like
messages were, so we're recording this at 3 p.m. my time right now. The messages were from 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
My phone has been on a charger. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. And it raises something that I also been thinking about, especially on the Mac, where the new Siri app is baked into Spotlight. It's not really baked into Spotlight. I mean, the way it works is if as you type into Spotlight, it's evaluating whether what you're looking for is one of the main core indexed things, which are apps, files, shortcuts actions, and clipboard items. So it's those 4 things. If it doesn't fit into one of those as it's searching through the index live, it flips over to Ask Siri, and then you can hit return and it will do the search. It'll bring back results in a window that's it floats on top of everything. It's kind of a temporary window. Then you can open it up in the app if you want. It's a good experience. It's a good user experience. The thing that strikes me as weird about it, though, is that Spotlight and the Siri app work on very different technologies. Spotlight is a deterministic index, and it's been rebuilt, and it's much faster in Golden Gate. Whereas the new Siri app is the AI of it all. And when you go into the Siri app, you no longer have the benefit of Spotlight, which is the problem that I ran into where I was trying to open the file, right? So in Spotlight, it's very simple for me to start to type pages, tab, and then search for like a word in that document that I was looking for, or the title. And then I can just hit return, and bam, it opens it up right in Pages, just exactly what I wanted. But that index, while it is part of the orchestration layer that's working with Siri, it isn't the functionality that is deterministically available through Spotlight isn't also available through Siri AI. So you have this disconnect where the new app is really just like searching for a Pages document. Spotlight lets you find apps and open them to a particular document in a way that's very much like, if you think of, I was thinking of it as like terminal commands. It's like, oh, it's on the fly, creating what would essentially be the effective equivalent of a command on the CLI for open, app name, and then document as like the parameter that's being fed to it. And the same thing is happening with Siri AI on Spotlight, where it's open Siri AI and then a string, which is the search query. Whereas when you're in Siri AI, you don't have the benefit of that kind of deterministic opening of documents and apps and things like that, which is a weird kind of one-way street, and and I kind of get it. I think maybe having too much Spotlight in Siri AI or too much Siri AI in Spotlight would pollute one or the other and make them both their own slightly bad experience. I'm not sure. On the one hand, I feel like having Spotlight in the Siri AI app would make it a better experience because you'd have better access to that index, but you just don't, and so it feels like incomplete compared to using Spotlight.
Have there been any more good examples of you using Siri AI on the Mac lately that you like?
Not really. I mean, it's fine for creating a quick one-off reminder, telling me what's on my calendar. But the reality these days is that I'm kind of in Codex anyway most of the day doing those kind of things. And so there's no real reason for me to open it to begin with. It really has to be very forced for me right now, because it's just not, it's really me experimenting for the review. It's not something that I would choose to use on my own because I don't feel like, the third party stuff just really isn't there. I mean, right. I have like one beta that kind of works with App Intents. So I think that might help a lot once that's available. But the things you can do within the system are kind of limited as it is. I mean, I can't do anything that's file management related, and that's a lot of what I'm doing day to day. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have I haven't noticed anything big and new in Siri AI. I haven't really seen any major changes or improvements during the course of the betas. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Inoreader. Inoreader helps you build your own personalized newsfeed by following websites, newsletters, YouTube channels, podcasts, social media feeds, and more in one place. Instead of relying on social media algorithms or jumping between apps all day, Inoreader lets you follow the sources you trust and get the updates directly. For anyone trying to keep up with a lot of information, that can make a big difference. You can create custom monitoring feeds to track keywords, brands, topics, companies, competitors, products, or broader industry trends across the web. Inoreader also gives you the tools to build a personal knowledge archive, save articles for later, highlight key information, add notes, and search through everything later when you need to come back to it. And Inoreader's intelligence features let you summarize articles, extract key insights, and make sense of large volumes of content in less time. There are also powerful filtering and automation tools so incoming content can be organized automatically with the most important updates surfaced while distractions are pushed out of the way. Inoreader is available on the web, iPhone, iPad, and Android with offline reading support on mobile. You can try Inoreader for free or explore everything the Pro plan has to offer with a 14-day free trial and no credit card required. New Pro subscribers can get 30% off their first year, too. Visit Inoreader.com to learn more and get started. That's INOREADER.com. Our thanks to Inoreader for their support of the show.
Just quickly while we're on the topic, how about the rest of, what's it called again?
Golden Gate.
Golden Gate. How about the rest of Golden Gate?
Oh, it's been great. I really like it. I mean, I think the design is something that just sort of fit like a glove pretty quickly, where I don't even notice it now. But last year with Tahoe, I wasn't someone who disliked liquid glass, but I did recognize on the Mac that it was very uneven the way it was implemented, and it's a lot more evened out now. So that part is good. The problem with all the performance enhancements that we're getting this year is that those start feeling normal very quickly. And whereas I felt the difference early on when I first installed the betas, now they just seem like the way it's supposed to work. And so they're hard to notice anymore. It just became the new normal, but they're great. I mean, there are things that are faster. And I do think so far, Spotlight has been a very big improvement. It does index a lot. Part of that, I think, is because, especially on my Mac Studio, I'm always working with a lot of big files during the week with the podcasts and writing and all kinds of things. So I'm always feeding it new information that needs to be indexed. And with every beta that I install, it's kind of re-indexing from scratch, I think, for most of these betas so far. So I'm not sure that will really be the case for people who install it for the first time, especially since what Apple did with the last version of 26, they've started the indexing already, even if you haven't installed Golden Gate. So I think that'll be a better experience for people who are coming to it for the very first time in the fall. How about you?
I mean, it's I have it on my MacBook Pro and I have it on the Mac Studio, and I'm keeping a Mac Mini on Tahoe just so that I can have an older version to compare to.
Yeah.
But it's been working pretty good so far. Every once in a while, like a permission dialog gets stuck and I have to reboot my machines, but it's fine. Yeah. I also thought of another test that we could do live.
Oh, what would that
so
be?
I asked Siri to search for topics, right, on iMessage.
Yeah.
Now I have an iMessage plugin for ChatGPT on desktop that searches my iMessage history. So maybe we can test this with voice mode, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm connecting. Let's see what happens. Hey, can you search iMessage and tell me what topics John told me that we could talk about on the podcast today?
Sure, let me check that for you.
So, I mean, it is going to take a few seconds, right?
Yeah.
Because it's actually going to my Mac Studio, and the Mac Studio is talking to a Mac Mini. But the Mac Mini should actually process the results in just a few seconds. So let's see what comes back.
Let's see what I find. It came back. John suggested App Store grab bag topics, an OS beta check-in, or a Siri app discussion. You settled on an easy vacation episode plus the beta check-in, with Siri as the focus.
Yeah, so that was exactly the answer.
Yes, that was like maybe 3 or 4 messages back and forth between us earlier this morning, and that was exactly what I said and exactly what you suggested.
Yep. And that included, again, the 10 seconds or so that we waited included the latency of my phone connecting to my Mac Studio, the Mac Studio connecting to a Mac Mini, which is on Tahoe, where I keep the iMessage history.
Okay.
So the Mac Studio is on Golden Gate and it's not signed into my iMessage account.
And it's down in your storage unit.
It's not in my storage unit. The Mac Mini is on Tahoe with my iMessage account and my iMessage history, and another instance of Codex. So those 10 seconds were me asking a question and then Codex on the phone talking to the Mac Studio SSH into the Mac Mini to run an iMessage vector search that takes about a second and coming back with a perfect response. So that's what look. That is obviously high end, right?
Yeah.
I fully recognize that.
Yeah.
But also, on the one hand, you have something that didn't work, which is Siri AI, and on the other, you have something that did work. So
I think it would have been a little faster if you would have been asking directly into the Mac.
Also, if I were not speaking. Also, like Codex was listening to me. If you play that clip back, you will hear Codex say, "Yeah, it came back," because it was actually listening to me, talking to you in the meantime, saying, "Yeah, we're gonna wait until it comes back." So it was also listening while in the meantime waiting for the response. I mean,
right.
What are we talking about here exactly? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, so look. I think it's going to be a fine, passable chatbot. Solid 7 out of 10, 6.5 out of 10, maybe.
Do you think it clears the bar of what was promised in 2024?
Mostly, yeah. I mean, and that is my feeling. We are, with this product, 2 years behind because this is what was promised 2 years ago. 2 years ago, if this came out 2 years ago, it would have been incredible.
Oh, yeah.
2 years
People
ago,
would have been blown away.
We had GPT-4.
Yeah.
We had Claude 3. 2 years ago, it would have been outstanding. The issue is that it's outstanding for Apple now. If you live in a vacuum, in a bubble, and you haven't seen what else is there to see for similar products, even if you don't pay for them, it's outstanding. The issue is that can you evaluate this product in a bubble where ChatGPT does not exist,
Right.
Gemini 3.5 does not exist, Claude does not exist?
Yeah, I think the thing that makes it the hardest for this app is the fact is the Claude code of it all, because first we had Claude code and then we had Codex. And then those things were ported from developer tools to productivity tools. So we have, ChatGPT work, and we've also got Cowork on the Claude side. And those things are doing essentially what App Intents are meant to do in a lot of ways. And they're just doing it better.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we will keep checking, and we are going to try, I think I speak for the both of us, we are going to try to keep a perspective of we are power users, but we should also try and think about this from the perspective of the average user. But right now, it's been 2 months. I still don't see myself outright replacing ChatGPT or other tools with Siri AI exclusively.
Yeah. I don't see replacing it in any way, shape, or form, because for me, where I've kind of settled is with things like using Codex and then having a side chat open, which is just ChatGPT. So if like little stuff comes up during the day and I'm working on something else, I can ask it right there. It's there is some benefit to this approach of an everything app that's been floated by OpenAI. There are a lot of design issues and a lot of problems with both Claude and Codex. On the other hand, I think that they have figured out that while their chatbot is popular, it's not the full product, and that we're starting to see an evolution beyond chatbots, and Apple's still back at chatbots.
Yeah.
All right, Federico.
Okay.
Good conversation. We're going to talk a little more in the Pro Show, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we have all this stuff kind of connected together. You touched on it briefly with your demo of ChatGPT voice and how that's going through multiple computers. I'm doing some similar things myself. And so we're going to talk about that. If you're interested in subscribing, just go on over to macstories.net and look at our podcast tab. You'll find links there for AppStories Plus, which is our longer, ad-free, and delivered early version of the show. And that's it for today's episode. Thanks again to our sponsors, both Finalist and Inoreader. You can find me and Federico online. We are at macstories.net, of course, but we're also on social media, where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.